So I've been given the dubious pleasure of trying to teach you in one session how to do good conference talks. That's kind of setting the bar quite high for me today, isn't it? Because I can't afford to give a terrible presentation today. Because the message you'll take away is, remember that terrible presentation of that guy who couldn't give a talk? That is how we're supposed to give a talk. So I've sort of set myself a challenge. Actually, Martin's gone out without closing the door. Can we just close the door, please? So I'm not bothering everybody else. I want to say this in my defence before I properly start. This isn't a conference presentation. You see how I did that? Just a little side step, but I was free. So this isn't a conference presentation because it's a kind of teaching exercise. So it's an hour and a half. Pity you if you have to give an hour and a half conference presentation. The purpose is more pedagogic, it's more a teaching exercise. There'll be breaks for you to discuss things. It's not a conference talk, but I do still hope to cover some of the basic skills. We'll deal with dealing with the unexpected, and we'll do all sorts of things. Okay, so I'm here, this is me. If anyone wants to talk to me, I live in A212 Portland Square, and I'm here to tell you how to talk the talk. So, one day, you'll be at a conference. You might be sitting in a room like this, full of excited, bored, distracted, tired people. You might have been in there for 5 hours, listening to lots of talks, and then it's your turn. This is the moment you can advance your career. How are you going to feel? I can remember how I felt the first time I gave a conference talk. I have a flashbulb memory for the event. My supervisor said to me, "You're giving a conference talk in January." I said, "Am I?" He said, "Yes, you are." At the London EPS, which is the Experimental Psychology Society. So, being a good postgraduate student, I prepared myself a talk, and I got myself to London, and I was sat in the audience, being nervous, and then I stood up, and there, in the third row, I can close my eyes and I can still remember, I was on the right-hand side, the lectern was here, I looked up, and just there, in the third row, was someone called Alan Baddeley. Those of you who are psychologists will know he's an FRS. He's the biggest name in British psychology. His research topic is memory, and I'm going to give my talk on memory. Okay, and he's sitting next to Tim Shallis, who's another senior academic who may be an FRS, I'm not sure, but he works on attention. And they were chatting, and I won't say what I felt like. I didn't feel great, but I remembered it. So that's what you're going to be like one day, with a bit of luck. But what a fantastic opportunity. When else was I going to get the chance to have Alan Badley's attention for 15 minutes? When else are you going to get the chance, as postgraduate students, to hold a room of experts in your thrall? They're going to have to listen to you. You can advance your career. What a fantastic opportunity to make a good impression. To be that confident person that they remember, what a great presentation that was. Yeah? I've been to conferences with other postgraduates. I remember distinctly a man called Alan Kingstone, who's now a professor in Canada. He was a PhD student a year or two above me in Manchester. He went to a conference in Oxford and he left with a job. Someone in the audience really liked what he was doing, had a postdoc position going up, and offered him a job. That could be you. If you're the confident, excellent presenter. It might be different, however, if you don't give quite such a confident, positive presentation. So which are you going to be? Are you going to be that first person? Or are you going to be this person? I also have another flashbulb memory. This time, it wasn't me. but this is when I was a lecturer at Liverpool University and we had a talk. I guess it was in a room about this size, to an audience about this size. And one of the postgraduates, I will not name them, not under any circumstances, but one of the postgraduates at the time gave a presentation that went along the following lines. She stood in the front, she said nothing for about 30 seconds, and then started to cry. At which point, her supervisor jumped up and whisked her off. How did that make the audience feel? Terrible. We'd inflicted that on her somehow. Yeah? So, you can give different kinds of impression. I'm going to hopefully, today, give you an impression that's positive. I mean, what's your audience going to look like after your 15 minutes? Are they going to be waiting on your every word? Are they going to be entertained and interested? Are they going to be fascinated? Are they going to be informed? Or will they be slightly different? Will they be clinging on to consciousness? Will they have given up all hope? So what's your audience going to be like? Hopefully, after the end of this session, you'll know how you can feel like this and make your audience feel like that. That's how you give a good impression. Easily said, not so easily done. Okay, so what I want to do in this session, in an hour and a half or so, is talk about some general principles of communicating with an audience, talk about the essential elements of giving good talks, talk about things you can do in advance, and talk about things you have to do when you deliver. Okay, so there's really 4 major sections. I will say at the outset, if anyone's got any questions, observations, please shout out, put your hand up, cough, or however you want to interrupt me. I'm quite cool with that. So, let's start off with general principles. Communication is not a one-way street. Communication is an act that occurs between a listener or a reader and a sender or a writer. Yeah? And the single biggest problem is that the person in charge giving the talk thinks that if I just say the words, that's the same as what's going to be heard. Well, wrong. Yeah? Communication is a process that involves a sender sending a message to the receiver and the receiver receiving some other message. Yeah? Now, the biggest mistake I see in presentations and talks and posters, etc., is that people think that writing a paper is the same as presenting a poster, is the same as giving a talk. Wrong. A paper isn't a poster isn't a talk isn't a paper isn't a website. None of those things are a conversation in the coffee room. They're all different. Scientific communication has to be done through a medium. And those media have different properties. And you have to know the properties of the medium you're dealing with in order to communicate effectively. How many people have been at a conference where the person, what they're saying is really, in their poster, what they're saying is, I wish I was giving a talk. And in their talk saying, I wish I was written this down. Because actually what they're doing is, they're reading out what I've written down. Yeah, the message there being, I don't want to talk to you. So, I want to introduce 4 basic principles of communication. Principle 1. What you think you're sending isn't necessarily what the person's hearing. Hands up, who's ever had an argument with their partner. That goes like this. But I said, oh no you didn't. I said I was sorry. Sorry. Hands up, who's had that conversation with, I said, no you didn't, you said that. No, I didn't say that. Yes, you did say that. Yeah? What you think you're saying is not the same as what the people think they're hearing. Yeah? That applies just as much to a conference talk. What you think you're saying is not necessarily what your audience is hearing. In a talk, what you're saying or what your message is everything. Yeah? It's the way that you say sorry. Isn't saying sorry, is it? How did I choose my slides? If I use a funny font, yeah, or a cutesy background, I'm saying something about me. You're learning something about me. How am I choosing to present myself? What did I wear today? How am I acting? We had a session in the class I run for master's students this year, where we all the students had a practice talk, and one person gave their talk like this. Luckily, I filmed it, and when I showed it to him, he was not impressed. But that's all that I could think of as I saw him. But what's he doing with his hands in his pockets? Everything about your behaviour is part of the message you're sending. You talk too fast, the message is, I don't want to be here. If you're not looking at anyone, the message is, I don't want to be here. If I start by talking in my jargon term and not introducing the subject to you, I'm saying I don't care what you think. That's the message that people are receiving if you're not taking care to send the message appropriately. So the first thing is know your audience, know how to communicate in their terms. Does anyone know the story of the Kennedy-Nixon first televised debate? What's the story?
What I know about it is that people who watched the debate said that Kennedy won the debate, but over the radio, people who heard the debate thought that Nixon won the debate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the message of what was said was judged that Nixon won it. But on the TV debate, because the medium is different, and the medium shapes the message. Yeah. So in here, he was seen as unreliable because he was sweating and didn't look good. If you're stretching or putting an arm up?
No. So it's basically the power of non-verbal communication, which is the important factor in that context.
And not just non-verbal, but everything. And there's much more. Yes, in this instance, there was other things going on. But in a paper, when you write a paper, people aren't judging what you look like. They're judging what you've written. In a talk, they will be judging what you look like. If you look like you're untrustworthy, that's the message they'll receive. So it is largely non-verbal, but there are some other aspects as well. Okay. This is an actual slide as well. But the principle I want to get across is that the receiver is never wrong. How can that be? The receiver is never wrong. The goal of a communicative act is for the sender to communicate with the audience. If the audience doesn't understand, it's not the audience's fault. A number of times I've had a conversation with a student who said, but I didn't mean it like that. I meant to say, yeah, but you didn't. If you guys are bored or have misunderstood, it's not your fault. It's tempting to blame the audience. Oh, they were so dim they didn't understand my genius. Yeah? But actually, it's my fault for not communicating properly. Yeah? So if you prepare a slide like this, it's not the audience's fault that they don't understand it. It's your fault for preparing a slide like this. Yeah? So the receiver is never wrong. In the act of communication, if you've not made yourself clear, it's your fault. And you only get one go. If you can stand up in front of a conference, you don't get to say next week, oh, sorry guys, I got anything wrong, can you come back? And let's have another go, I think I've cleared it up this time. No, they've already judged you. Which is principle 4. The audience gets to judge. You can't stop them. You're forming an impression of me right now. On a TV show, they get to press the yeah. I was at a conference week before last. I woke up after about 15 minutes of a talk, and I got out my iPad and I started reading the email. Because I judged that person. They had just given a dreadful first 10 minutes. They'd lost me. Can't do anything. That's not where you want to be. You're not where you want to be as a PhD student. You want to be making the best possible impression. In the audience are potential future employers, in the audience are potential future reviewers of your papers, potential reviewers of your grants. You want to make a good impression. They will judge you. You're in control of what the communication is. They're in control of the judgment of it. And you can't stop them. What you have to do is win. You have to be good. You have to make a good impression. What you want to achieve is that the message you're trying to send is, the message that is being received is the message you were trying to send. Not distracted by your bizarre choice of clothing or a t-shirt with a rude slogan on it, or by your incomprehensible slides, or your use of jargon that you haven't explained to anyone, or whatever. If you achieve that, you'll do a long way towards achieving your goals. Okay, so how do you do it? How do we do it? Well, number one is understand the audience. Now, mostly in a conference, it's straightforward. The audience are people like you. What do you want from a conference talk? Do you want a long list of text-based slides? Do you want to be bored by a monotone presentation? Do you want like tiny font and overcomplicate? Just, think it through. What do you want? And then write the list of the things you don't want and apply it to your own talk. Duh! How many people have been to those kind of presentations? You think, well, how many people have been to a dreadful presentation? You're very lucky, sir. You've been to nothing but great presentations. Look, this audience, they've been there for 4 hours. This might be the 3rd day of the conference. Think of that. Think of that when you're presenting. So understand what they want. Are they all experts in your field? Do they know the nuance of theory in your world? Now, sometimes the answer is yes. If you're going to a workshop who are all experts in a particular domain, then you can assume a level of knowledge that's appropriate to that. However, if it's a general conference, they might not know that. If it's just a general psychology, neuroscience event, whichever your background is, they could know nothing about your topic. Think about that. So when students ask me, what should I put in my talk? My first question is, who is the audience? Who are you talking to? And make sure that you know what the audience is likely to want. That's what you should try and aim to communicate. So, and I should say as an aside, the same goes for a paper. When you write a paper, the first thing you need to know is what does the journal take? Rather than writing a paper and going, where can I hawk it around? You start with which journal am I trying to write for, and you write for that audience. Next step is to try and communicate in a language that the audience will understand. That doesn't mean dumbing down your presentation. It means making the language appropriate for the audience to get what they need from your talk. And then understanding the medium of communication in a conference setting. So what is the medium that we're dealing with? Well, I've already introduced it. It's an oral medium. You're going to be talking to people. You know that. You've only got a certain amount of time. So the second question I often ask students, well, how long have you got? Because a long presentation isn't a slow version of a short presentation. You work out what you can achieve in unit time, and then you shape your message to the amount of time you've got. If you've got an hour, you can relax, you can tell stories, you can break out, you can go off on a side issue and return to the main. If you've got 5 minutes, good luck with that approach. Yeah? You get across one point in 5 minutes. So you've got to talk to people in the language they understand, in introducing the concept you want to introduce. You've got to be aware of the time. You get to use some slides. Fine. So we know it's a visual and an auditory communication. But this, this is the killer. There's an audience looking at you. And we know about audience effects in psychology. So where most students go wrong is that they go in their study room, they're talking to their friends, and they practice their talk. They've got it down absolutely packed to 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. Yeah, they've got their slides. And then they stand up and look at an audience, like I'm looking at you now. And that audience might be, 3 hours into the day. Or in this, I quite like this one because look at that. Look at that face. How are you going to feel confident in that? Impress me. Impress me. Yeah? You get this going on in student lectures now. You've got to beat the mobile phone. Are you interested enough for me to stop looking at Facebook? So this guy just looks like he's going to love the speaker. This one wants to chat with a friend. That's the killer. Being able to hold an audience and interest them when they don't want to be interested. So what happens when you're faced with a slightly antagonistic audience? You speed up. It's a natural, social, psychological phenomenon to get yourself out of a threatening situation. How do I get myself out of the threatening situation? I speed up. Get out of here. Yeah? Or sometimes, if you're very fortunate, and you get an audience who seem to be very receptive to your genius, you think, oh, this is going well. I will tell that funny story, and suddenly your time's up, and you haven't actually got to where you want to be. It's that extra, this bit, that makes giving a presentation so hard. Yeah? So one tip is to practice in front of an audience. It took me a lot of time as a lecturer to get used to the concept of talking in front of an audience. An audience who looks like bored. An audience who look lost. Knowing how to respond to the changes in facial expression of a group of people looking at you. It can be quite intimidating. Know what it is you're trying to achieve. If you see giving a talk as just, can I get over this? Can I reach the end without making a complete prat of myself and tripping over the hurdles? Yeah? Well, if that's your goal, set about your talk in a particular way. Make sure that you put in place all the necessary scaffolding to jump each hurdle. I would advise early on in your career just making sure you can get to the end and get across your message. Not everyone's able to have an audience laughing their heads off. But not all talks have to be funny. Not all talks have to be whiz-bang, flashy with bright lights and twirling PowerPoints. One of my colleagues who works at Warwick, she says to me, Tim, I don't know how you give your presentations. You don't have any notes. You usually tell me, how do you do that? And I say, Liz, your presentation is fantastic. She gives the most polished, organised, interesting, informative presentations. I've never heard her tell a joke in about 20 years. But people don't go to her talks expecting jokes. They go to hear good science, and that's what they get. Yeah? So know what it is you're trying to achieve. What message do you want to get across about yourself? Do I just want to get to the end? Do I want to make people remember a certain bit and not others? What is it you're trying to achieve? And think about that as you're preparing. Right. A conference talk, then, is an attempt to convey a message. Not just any message, a specific message about yourself, about your science. It is supposed to be for the benefit, and I put the benefit there because it's supposed to be good for the audience. Yeah, it's not for you, it's for the audience, and it's supposed to be good for them. How many people have been to a talk where they think this is all about the ego of the speaker? Yeah. It's not supposed to be about the speaker, it's supposed to be about the audience. So what's the audience? It's supposed to be for their benefit. And the audience is not any audience, it's a specific audience. It's that particular audience with that particular background information who are looking for this bit of information. And you've got a set number of resources. You might have audio-visual stuff in, you might have to just give a talk with no slides. I'll just stop there for a moment, tell you an anecdote. When I was a postgraduate, this is now I survived my trial by Alan Badley. I got to my 3rd year, and so I was coming up to my writing up phase, and my supervisor said to me, "How would you like to go to Acapulco?" Yes, please. So, I went to Acapulco. A dream destination for a postgraduate conference, yes? Everyone think that's a great place. Who would go to Acapulco if they got the chance to give a conference talk? Yeah, that was pretty much my take. What I didn't realise until I got there was that it was the tail end of the hurricane season. I'm not joking. One of the hotels about a quarter of a mile away had the front ripped off the hotel. The other thing that they didn't tell you about Acapulco is that if you're there for any length of time, you're guaranteed to get what is euphemistically called Montezuma's revenge. Delhi belly in India, which you know that. So I lost 3/4 of the stone. In a week and a half. I had to go to Acapulco, if that's what you want. I had to go to the conference through torrential rain. I knew that I couldn't sit in the audience for any length of time, shall we say. And so I'm feeling desperately ill. There's a howling gale outside. I've lost a lot of weight. I'm feeling terrible. And then the last thing is that my slides, this is the days of acetates, where people used to have acetates. And then the conference organiser says, "Oh no, there's no overhead projectors." Standing there with some acetates, an audience, sorry, all the audience are German, by the way. It wasn't an unalloyed triumph, shall we say. Okay. So, the essentials are to combine these different elements. You've got to think about what you're trying to say. What does the audience want to hear? What can be sustained by the medium itself? What is possible to communicate orally? And what other constraints might there be, such as the availability of AV equipment, the size of the room I'm talking to? Will I have to be behind the microphone and standing in one place? Can I move about? Will my pointer work? All those kinds. So there are constraints. And all those things have got to inform how you set about preparing this talk. So I'm going to start with the message to be communicated. It's simple. The message you should communicate is the news. It's science. Yeah? So, imagine yourself in the future. You've done some studies towards your PhD. What will be the news? Any thoughts? What's likely to be the news that you're going to have to deliver? Anyone?
New discovery?
Sorry, I heard two people speak at one sentence. Sorry?
New discoveries?
New discovery. Excellent. Your results. Yeah? What you have found. That's the news. That's what you should be focusing your talk on. How many people have been to a talk where the first 20 minutes are background literature review? Yeah. Do the audience not know this? Can they not go and read the papers? Now, you should provide the background necessary to understand the news, but just showing off that you've read loads of papers isn't going to win you any friends. Get on with the news. That's what the audience want to hear. That's what you're there to deliver. So focus your message on what is new. Yeah? That's where the main focus of your talk is. So that's the message you should want to communicate, and that's what the audience want. But what they want is the news wrapped up in a nice story. They want the narrative. Yeah? What leads up to the news? What does the news mean? So, okay, we're going to have a little breakout for a couple of minutes. What do you think makes a good story? How you can rather than just, I will now read you the background information, then I will present. How do you start? By bringing in some story-like elements. By starting off with an anecdote. How did I start my presentation today? So, the audience loves a good story. EPA. Engage the audience. There's various dubious statistics mentioned on the internet. If you look up giving good presentations, you get lots of business presentation websites. But they tell you you've got about 30 seconds to grab the audience's attention. They'll judge it. If you were mumbling, yeah, they will, this is really good. And they'll start to switch off. Mobile phones will start to come out. Yep. Engage the audience. Once you've got their attention, state the problem. State the mystery to be solved. What don't we know? Create some tension. What actions have you taken and what resolution have you come to? Create the problem, show the solution, show what it means. That's the basis of a short talk. Now, in an hour you can create multiple problems, but in a single conference presentation you want to be doing this. How many people have been to a conference presentation where this is not the first step? All of us who've been to a conference. Because people don't engage you, because they don't talk your language. They don't make their world meet your world. I'm not a researcher in X, so you need to reach out to me. If you don't reach out to me, I'll shut off and just like you're boring. That's the deal. What can the medium sustain? I've already said it. A paper can sustain a lot of detail, a lot of sophisticated analysis, a lot of story arcs, if you like. Right, I'm going to go off and analyse this, and then I'm going to go back and analyse that, and then I'm going to analyse this in this way, and then I'm going to present an analysis of all 4 experiments so far, etc. Now, here we have a reader who's trying to make sense. They can read and reread and reread and reread and go over it as often as they like until they understand the point you're making. You can sustain a sophisticated level of storytelling, if you like. You can't do that when the medium is a 15-minute presentation. You cannot get away with all the analyses you want to get away with. You can't afford the level of detail of literature review that you would in a paper, because you just need to get your simple message across. Now, a poster is somewhere between the two. I'm not going to talk about posters. So think that through. The number of times I've been to a conference in which people think they can just take all the analyses from their paper they're writing and present them verbally. I mean, 80% of conference talks I go to that fail are like that. Think of the memory demands. I'm on analysis 7 now. Can I remember in a speech the first 6 analyses? No, I can't. Do I get to revisit them? No, I don't. And worse than that, I'm trying to remember that analysis 3, and that guy at the front keeps talking at me. Shut up a minute, will you? I'm trying to remember the 3 things you told me already. So, the medium can sustain only a very simple message. Don't try and show off by putting 47 analyses in. What are the constraints? The constraints are the ones we've talked about. They're the things you're going to have to cope with. So think about all those things. How am I going to prepare a talk that's the right length, to the right audience, that's going to have some story features of drama, interest, that's going to be simple enough? How do I do that? Well, the answer is, of course, preparation. And before we talk too much about preparation, now we need to deal with the elephant in the room. Yeah? It's the monster known as PowerPoint. I remember, I'm old enough to remember the days before PowerPoint. When people came and had slides that span in, I thought it was cool. That's how old I am. It's not cool. Okay, so we need to talk about PowerPoint. Okay, PowerPoint is a tool. Yeah? It's a tool, and like all tools, it can be used and abused. If you're making a cake and you haven't got a whisk, you know, a power drill is not really an acceptable alternative. But just because it spins round doesn't mean you have to use it. Yeah? You are in charge. The fact that PowerPoint has a number of default settings doesn't mean that they're the settings you should use. It's your presentation, not Microsoft's. You should use PowerPoint to achieve what you want to achieve, not be ruled by PowerPoint. Yeah? Right, now I want to spend a little time, sort of aside, talking about crime. Do you have, and you all come from different countries, you have this concept of crime watch programs where they report a terrible crime and ask for the help of the audience in solving the crime? Well, this is a serial crime. You've probably heard of it. It's the terrible case of death by PowerPoint. Have anyone heard of death by PowerPoint? It's a terrible crime. The victims usually bored to death or riddled with bullet points. I like that one. Okay. The suspect. Usually, no description available. Only description that witness has been able to provide is desperately dull. One witness is reported as saying, "I couldn't believe it. I was waiting for a 10-minute presentation when this guy opened a 63 text-based presentation and started reading each one point by point. At some point I zoned out. I can't remember anything else." Yep. What's the motive for that crime? What do you think the motive for that crime was?
The views?
Sorry?
The abuse?
Abuse. It's a form of abuse, so I'll certainly agree with you on that.
Yeah, he wants to transfer as much information as possible.
Perfectionism, maybe.
So I missed that second one.
Perfectionism.
Perfectionism? It's a funny kind of perfectionism that makes it not perfect though, isn't it? I think the motive for that crime, well, whoever the criminal is, they lack any human empathy. Sociopathy, I think. They have no cognizance of what it's like to be in an audience, which is odd, because 15 minutes earlier, that's where they were. Yeah?
Lots of short-term memory.
Lots of... Now we're getting close. People write the talk because they think they need that for their own presentation. They're writing the presentation for themselves. They're not writing it for the audience. A presentation should be for the audience. That's what lessons for. But I know where it comes from. I'm guilty of it myself because you think, right, how am I going to give an hour and a half talk with no material to read from? And the answer is it's difficult. And it's worse because there's a bunch of people looking at you saying, entertain me. But it comes with practice. Right. How can you help? Answer, don't be guilty of this crime. Yeah? Know what the audience wants. I'm going to introduce another crime. Well, it's not a crime as much. This is a sad case. We've heard about death by PowerPoint. The other one that is common with PowerPoint is power pointlessness. Anyone heard of power pointlessness? Okay. When preparing your slides, it's very tempting to write everything that you're going to say so you don't forget. It is distracting and annoying because it disrupts your flow. And apparently, people can read quicker than you can talk. Why do you do it? So you don't forget what you're going to say. What's the effect? But it's worse than that. If that were not bad enough, it's worse. Because it causes you to break down your argument into bullet points. that you present one at a time. What does that send out? Well, it sends out that you're not really communicating so much as reading a series of bullet points, that you've got a memory problem, that you don't really know your stuff, that you can't go beyond what's written down there, that you're not an impressive speaker, that you don't deserve that postdoc job, that you aren't on top of where you want to be. So, it's bad. Chris and Noah's heard this before, so I apologise, Chris.
No problem.
But I want to give you a historical moment now by PowerPoint. Now, you're not all UK citizens, so you won't all know Churchill's famous speech to the House of Parliament, but this was Churchill's speech given in 1940. He'd just been made Prime Minister of a united government. Britain was facing invasion, and it was a very dark time indeed for the British people. And Churchill decided to write his speech by PowerPoint. What did he say? He said, "Thank you for appointing me Prime Minister of this united government. I'm going to really try very hard in my role. My policy that I shall be is to pursue the fight against tyranny, because what I really want to achieve is victory. It's really important that we have victory, because without victory, we're not going to survive. It's going to be very, very dark days indeed. So it's really important that we try and win. And to do that, we need to come together and be united. And through our being united, we'll have strength, and maybe we shall prevail. Do I have your vote behind this cause? Are you all leaping up with fervour? No. I'm not going to read all this, but I'll give you a flavour. It's very difficult to read this without putting on an accent, but I won't. I will say to the House, as I have said to those who have joined this government, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears and sweat. We have before us an ordeal of the most grievous kind. We have before us many, many months of struggle and suffering. You ask, what is my policy? I can say it is to wage war by sea, land and air with all our might and with all our strength that God can give us, to wage war against the monstrous tyranny never surpassed in the dark, lamentable catalogue of human crime. Now are you with me? Maybe a bit more. This is communication. This is PowerPointlessness. Yeah? You are there to communicate with your audience. Don't let PowerPoint ruin it for you. It's tempting to think, I'm going to write my slides in advance, and I'll write everything I need to write. This meets the 6-point rule that you'll find on the internet about how to do slides. There's no more than 6 words, and there's no more than 6 points, so what a great slide that is. Not. Yeah, it's a barrier to communication. That's PowerPoint. So, preparation. You've got to bring these things together. What do I want to communicate? What does the audience want? What do the medium sustain? What are the constraints? All together in your slides, given that you've got a certain amount of time, given that you want to tell the news with this EPAR plan of engage, problem, action, resolution. So prepare a simple news story. Engage the unit attention, state the problem, deliver the news, conclude. Everything else goes in the trash can. When you've written your 912 slide presentation, then you start editing it. Yeah. Writing it's good. It's good for memory, good rehearsal. Okay, you've learned it a bit more, but you don't then inflict it on your audience. Yeah, they don't need the drafts. They don't need the full version. They need the shortened version. Okay. I'm going to try and give you now, if I can have a volunteer, to do timekeeping. Can I have a timekeeper volunteer who's going to give me a 1-minute warning? I'm going to give you a 5-minute presentation, okay, of my own research. All I need is someone to tell me when I've got 1 minute left. So who's got a watch on? Someone looking for a phone? You give me a 1-minute warning. Okay? This is me on the tightrope. I don't know how this is going to go. So I'm going to tell you something about my research. All I'm asking is, you tell me when to go, and you tell me when 4 minutes has passed. Not the old fashioned, right? That's what I like to see, technology in action. So tell me when we're ready. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking to you about my research that I've been doing on the phenomenon called unconscious plagiarism. Unconscious plagiarism is when we misremember somebody else's ideas as our own. And this is work I've been doing that's funded by the ESRC and has been done with colleagues at the University of Plymouth. Unconscious plagiarism is sometimes called cryptomnesia, and I got interested in unconscious plagiarism when, about 20 years ago now, one of my PhD students accused me of stealing her ideas. I would have been merely cross had it not been for the fact that within a few months of that initial event, I was in a conversation with a colleague called Marie Carroll from Australia who was visiting, and she told me a story which one of her PhD students had accused her of stealing her ideas. And we thought, that's odd. That's a big thing for a PhD student to do. I wonder why they did that. So we got interested in the topic of unconscious plagiarism, and what we found is that most research in this field follows a basic paradigm that was introduced by Brown and Murphy in 1989. And the research paradigm goes like this. Groups of 4 people in the original study get together and they're given a problem to solve. And they have to take turns, one at a time, to generate answers to that problem. So it might be something very simple like, give me kinds of fruit. And each person says a kind of fruit in turn. They go round and round each time giving their own fruits. And then they do a different category and a different category. And different tasks have been used in different studies. What Brown and Murphy reported is that later, when one person was asked to remember the fruits that they had said, around about 7% of what they said actually came from other members of the group. Additionally, what Brown and Murphy reported is that when asked to think of new fruits that nobody had said, around about 9% actually came from the first session, including plagiarising themselves. Now, this has been demonstrated many times since 1989. It's been shown to occur more after a delay. It's been shown to be related to group size. It's been shown across many different tasks, the same basic phenomenon. And it's been labelled, in a rather amusing way, kleptomnesia, an unconscious theft of ideas. Okay? But is it an unconscious bias towards theft? Intellectual theft. Surprisingly, what no one's looked at is the tendency to give away our own ideas, and that's what we were looking at in the study I'm going to tell you about. So in this study, we modified the Brown and Murphy paradigm. We wanted to look at people's memory for their own ideas and memory for a partner's ideas. We wanted them to be equal in size, so we had people working in pairs, and they generated solutions just like the groups of 4 did. And they either remembered their own ideas or they were instructed to remember their partner's ideas. Everything else was the same. And the question we were interested in is, do we steal more when recalling our own ideas from partners, or do we give away more when recalling our partner's ideas? Here's the data we collected. So we tend to be better at remembering our own ideas than our partner's ideas. That's called the generation effect, which is well known. But if we look here, we tend to give away more of our ideas, these are wrong source errors, than we steal from our partner. That was a significant effect. In absolute terms, we give away our own ideas more than we steal from our partner. And in terms of proportion of the things we say, around about 7% of the things we say are stolen, we recall home. Remember, that's exactly the figure that Brown and Murphy said. But it was 17% of what we thought was our partner's was actually our own. Twice, more than twice, almost 3 times more likely to give away our. This bias towards anti-plagiarism has been shown many times. We've run many studies on it. It's been shown over a delay. Even when told to recall your own and your partner's ideas, the same pattern occurs. And when we warn people that these errors can occur, they still do it. So we've shown this effect many, many times. So what I want to finish this talk with is a moral. So what's the moral of this presentation? The moral is, be careful who you talk to about your good ideas. Not because they'll steal them. You might give them away. Thank you very much. Any questions? That's 5 minutes on. How did I do it? Okay, here's take 2. This is how I prepared it. So I'm going to turn around. Right. First of all, the title will appear in the conference proceedings. So I gave it a funny title to make people come. If you know the Frank Sinatra song, much more than this, I did it my way. Well, you did it my way. Yeah? But I don't want it just to be funny. I want people to know what the psychology is. Yeah? Then I thank the people who funded me, because I have to. And I chose a very simple layout, a minimal text design, which I wrote and then edited and edited and edited and edited, trying to cut it down to 2 to 3 simple statements per slide, using animation to produce a point in turn so I knew where you were looking, and I highlighted the key points I wanted you to focus in on red. So I introduced both terms, cryptomnesia and unconscious plagiarism. I introduced cryptomnesia because it's only kleptomnesia, it's only funny if you know it's also called cryptomnesia. I produced this picture because it A, has got human interest, B, it enabled me to explain the design. Yeah. I didn't tell you that there were 4 experiments in their study. I didn't laboriously go through the significance of every study that they did. I just told you 7% and 9%. Yeah. That's all you needed to know. Okay? I asked a question to keep your interest. And I didn't go through all of our design. I just told you we modified Brown and Murphy, and I told you the minimum was pairs. I didn't write all the details on the slide. I told you what you needed to know, and I finished with a simple question to lead into my data that I'm going to present next. Here's my data, simple format. I haven't got error bars. I haven't got the. This is not a SPSS slide, nor is it a copy of the slide from the paper. It's nice and colourful, simple, and I put on, I colour coded it, but I also used hashing because some people are red-green colourblind. I focused your attention by having the bar there. I brought in the percentages to introduce the concept of output bound measures, and I did it one step at a time. I told you that we'd run many, many studies. I didn't put up 14 slides in 30 seconds. I just told you we've done it lots of times, and you believe me. I put up the moral of present. What is he going to say next? Well, who finishes with a moral? Yeah. So that's why I put it up, to get your intrigue. Then I finished with a joke. And then I signalled it was the end by saying thank you very much. Yeah. That was the duck paddling underneath the serene performance above the water. Yeah. It takes practice. It takes thinking about what the audience need to know. It takes an appreciation of what you can get in 5 minutes. It looks easy. It isn't. Actually, it's quite difficult to do a short talk. It's easier to do a long talk. What I also tried to do, of course, is I tried to control my speech. I tried to look at all of you. I didn't have a lot of chance, but I tried to respond to your reactions. I tried to look relaxed. And I tried to get you to remember one thing. We give away ideas as well as steal. It's a simple idea. Did you feel overwhelmed? Did you feel underwhelmed? Don't break my heart. Hopefully, it was about the right amount of information to get across in 5 minutes. Yeah? That's what you've got to think. Okay, so delivery. I just like this title. Who could not want to read this article? Yeah? Engage your audience. Yeah? I told you about that story of my PhD student accusing me of stealing her ideas. Well, that's an interesting idea, isn't it? My God. He steals other people's ideas. Yeah? So get your audience's attention. You can use those storytelling elements we talked about. Human interest. Mystery. Who could not want to know how, in the West End Evening Standard, the police managed to arrest Batman? Who could not want to know that story? Okay? I'm not going to have time to go through that. There's a little link here to the importance of getting your audience's attention. Control the audience's attention. This is a divided attention situation. Yeah? So, what you don't want to do is lose your audience by having them read. I showed you the slide, the audience reads faster than you can talk. So you need to control the audience's attention. Right now, there is nothing for you on that screen, so you're listening to me. Now there really is no reason for you to look at the screen. You've got to listen to me. Now I know where you're looking. I don't have to say anything. If, however, things are happening, oh, that didn't work. Things are happening on the screen. Why doesn't that work? Ah, so I pressed the button. So now things are happening on that screen, but you're thinking, where's it going? You're not really listening to me. But it's doing some very strange things on that screen. So you've got to be aware that if you're distracting attention on the screen, you could lose your audience. You have to know when to speak and when not to speak. The art of a good presentation is to know where your audience are attending. When do you want them to attend to the screen? When do you want them to attend to you? How can you use the two media together rather than competing by putting everything on the screen and then you just speaking over the top of it? The number of times I'm sitting in the audience and I'm screaming, just shut up! You want me to read that? Shut up. If you don't want me to read it, don't put it up. What is it? The idea that you can put up a load of text and then talk over it. I can't think of a good reason to do that. You're either saying the same thing which is on the screen, which is simply duplication, or it's different, in which case it's interference. So try to think about where you expect the audience's attention to be. Remember, these are human beings you're talking to, so talk in a conversational style. Try and talk to them in a way that they will understand, and look people in the eye. The biggest lesson I learned as a lecturer is I had a fantastic lecture prepared, and my very first ever lecture, it's going to be fantastic. Page 1, yes, page 2, hang on, they're all lost. They're all going, oh, forget that. Because if you don't know where your audience are mentally, you're going to lose them. They have to be with you, not behind you, or worse, without you entirely. Yeah? Yeah? You're going to get feedback. Prepare for that. Ideally, that feedback is smiles and nods and interest, not disinterest, hostility, or boredom. But if it is those things, you've still got to deliver your talk. Yeah? And if you start by simply, today I will be presenting my research on ground and earth paradigm, which is well established in the literature, yeah? You're going to induce hostility, boredom. Yeah? You're going to lose the audience before you even get started, so don't go there. Most of all, be a human being. Yeah? I have no problem at all with people who say, oh, sorry, I've lost it. Just give me a minute. All right, I remember what I was going to say here. And they admit a mistake. Admitting a mistake is fine. Being slightly shy is fine. You don't all have to be Robin Williams, the most entertaining, wacky, wild performer. You have to be true to yourself and deliver the presentation you want to be. But you're a human being. Think about how you would want to communicate your science to a friend, in a coffee bar. Where would you start? What do they need to know? They don't need to know all this, they just need to know this. That's the way you communicate. And an audience is just made up of people. You don't need to shout at them, you don't need to bore them into submission, you need to bring them along with you. And you need to be reactive, because when you look in their eyes and they go, you don't just plough on regardless. You say, okay, right, let me just go over that again. So the paradigm is this. So the procedure we used was that. So just before I go on to experiment 2, let me just tell you again experiment 1, where we found this. So what we were predicting was this, but we didn't get that. Drama, intrigue, mystery. Pause for effect. So in experiment 2, we were going to do this. Yeah? You look in their eyes and you see whether they're with you. We start about 5 minutes late. Now, this is my illustration of my last message. So I was going to finish here, but I didn't. I said there were going to be 4 steps, there are in fact 5. What's number 5? Number 5 is have a backup. Yeah? Now, why have a backup? No, look, we got to the end. I could have said, thank you very much for your attention. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you got something out of it, the slides will be available, blah, blah, blah. And you would never have known that there was 5. Yeah? You wouldn't have known. You would have thought what a great talk that was. Or not. But having an extra stage makes me feel I've got a safety net. Yeah? Because you stand up in front of an audience, you've got 20 minutes to talk, you prepared your talk, and you suddenly realise, with a sinking horror, you're on 2 slides to go, and there are 18 minutes left. Maybe I hurried that a little. Yeah? Well, you can have some slides saved up where you re-explain your procedure, where you have the subsidiary analysis you are going to go through. The audience may never know it, but knowing that you've got it is a reassurance. You have a safety net underneath you that you know you can't finish early. Because if you do finish early, they don't know what that blank slide means. You just skip on to the next section. So, advanced suggestion, don't try and cram it all into your talk, but put it after a couple of blank slides so you know it's there. Oh, I seem to have finished a little early. Let me just go back to experiment 1 and tell you about the analysis I didn't have time to tell you about before. Number 2, know your opening line. The worst moment of a presentation is the moment you step up to that microphone. That's the moment your mind goes blank. Yeah? Hello? Is anyone in there? Yeah? It's terrifying. And that's the moment your audience are going to judge you. Yeah? Can you read the book title? How to Make a Good First Impression. So, know what you're going to say in the first 20 seconds. Having a nice anecdote, a nice introduction. And once you get that over that fear, and you find yourself, here I am, I'm talking, they're listening, they're even smiling, then, yeah. But if you stand up and go, or worse, the Liverpool scenario, the tears start rolling, the audience starts looking horrified, you feel terrible, you're spiralling down. Yeah? So rehearse that first line. Prepare yourself a spontaneous anecdote. Yeah? This is Alan Badley, and this is Tim Shallis, and these are the people I told you about at the start. That was my prepared spontaneous anecdote. Yeah? A spontaneous anecdote like that serves 2 purposes. One, that we've already talked about, draws you in. He was once like me, a terrified postgraduate, scared by big name academics in the audience. He's a human being like me. Maybe I'll give him the time of day. Yeah? That's number 1. Number 2, it's a nice way of padding out your talk. Oh my God, I'm finishing 15 minutes early. Time for an anecdote. Yeah? If conversely you're running out of time, well then nobody hears the anecdote. Nobody knows he was ever going to be there. But it's padding material that if you need something behind you, it's another safety net. It has a double whammy. You can draw in your audience, but you can also then use it or not use it as you see fit. It doesn't have to be true. It's a story. That one was true. Another time your mind goes blank is when you've done your 15 minutes, your brain shuts down. You think, you've climbed every hurdle in that 110 metres race, yeah? And you've crossed the finish line with triumph. But conferences are crueler than that. They don't say, well done. They say, right now, you get to answer questions. But your brain shuts down. And what you're going to do when it shuts down, because it will, my want it is to thank the questioner for their excellent question. Mostly questioners ask questions because they want to show off about how clever they are and how they've thought of something that you haven't thought about. So if you say, thank you for that, I'll have to think about that. Maybe we can talk later. There's nowhere for them to go. They can't say, ah! Yeah? Now, that is a one-shot deal. You can't say any questions. Thank you for that question. Thank you for that question. But hopefully it's a backup. You know, if you do get a question you can't really answer, don't go, oh, God, I can't answer. Oh, that's a good question. Thank you forward. Okay, so that is the end of my slides. I will circulate these overheads to the room. There are some links you can follow. There's the how not to present. There's an interesting presentation on why PowerPoint doesn't work, for all the things I've been saying. And there's the excellent how not to do a presentation I showed you part of. But do watch it to the end. It's got some great jokes in it. Thank you very much for your attention. If anyone's got any questions, I'll happily deal with them. If not, then we have reached